Well, Nagel's strategy here is to argue that death is a bad thing for the person who dies, and that it's a bad thing because it is a loss. It's a certain type of bad thing. All sorts of things happen to us. Some of them we value as good, some of them we value as bad. But not all bad things for us, not all misfortunes or evils are of the same type. Some things are positively bad, meaning they hurt, they cause suffering. Getting beat up is bad, you know. Having stomach cramps is bad. Getting dumped by your girlfriend or boyfriend is bad, and these things are positively bad because they hurt, they cause suffering, and so they are bads of a certain sort. But I think that Nagel is replying to Epicurus here by accusing him of lumping together all bads under that category of things that are positively bad, in the sense that there are certain features of the experience which cause pain, bad sensations, physical or psychological, even. If all bads are of that type, then death probably isn't a bad, because death doesn't hurt. Dying may hurt, but one of the things that Epicurus makes us do is to think about the distinction between dying and death. That dying is the process that leads to death, but dying is not death. So dying may hurt, but death doesn't. So if all bads, all misfortunes are events that cause suffering, then certainly death is not a bad. Again, we're talking about bad for us, the one who dies, rather than others who continue to live, of course. And this is certainly what Nagel's getting at in the beginning for the first part of the essay. What sort of bad is death? This is, where are we? The bottom of page 74. If we turn from what is good about life to what is bad about death, the case is completely different. Essentially, though there may be problems about their specification, what we find desirable in life are certain states, conditions, or types of activity. It is being alive, doing certain things, having certain experiences that we consider good. What are the goods of life? Just doing things, being in certain states, experiencing things. But if death is an evil, it is the loss of life rather than the state of being dead or non-existent or unconscious that is objectionable. That's important, right? That is, if death is an evil, it's because it's loss of life. It's not because being dead is bad. Because being dead isn't being like anything. Let's just say, compare it with being ill, being physically ill. If you have a really bad illness and you're bedridden, you experience the loss of the goods of life that you normally would experience, being healthy, moving around, going about your day. But you also experience the pains and sufferings of being ill. But being dead is not like that, right? We're not there to know that we're losing out on the goods of life, nor are we feeling any kind of pain or suffering. But if death is an evil, if it is a bad, it must be in some sense because of the loss of the goods of life, not because being dead is any kind of state that we can describe. It's not. There's no being dead. The dead are in the past. They don't exist anymore, according to the Epicurean view. We're looking at different views in this course. So, more goods of life, better. The more the better. But you can't really say the more bads of death. There are he makes this funny statement on top page 75. Death, however, is not an evil of which Shakespeare has so far received a larger portion than Proust. Shakespeare died, around 1610. Proust probably died 1930s or 40s. So Shakespeare has been dead a longer time than Proust, but that doesn't mean that he's received more of the bads of death because he's been dead longer than Proust has, right? That doesn't make any sense. So the bads of death are different from the goods of life. The goods of life are cumulative, and more is better than less. Where the bads of death, it's a different sort of thing. What's the problem? Can't we just say that? Well, I mean, death is a bad, and it's a bad because it's a loss, and losses are bad. I mean, some bads are positively bad in that they hurt, cause suffering. Some bads are bad because they're the loss of goods, right? And death we put in the second category. Why can't we just say that? Well, because there are certain problems, certain obvious problems that are raised there that he has to deal with. And he says here again on the bottom, page 75, if we are to make sense of the view that to die is bad for the one who dies, it must be on the ground that life is a good and death is a corresponding deprivation or loss. Bad not because of any positive features, but because of the desirability of what it removes. We must now turn to the serious difficulties which this hypothesis raises. Difficulties about loss and privation in general and about death in particular. Well, okay. It gets a little bit murky at this point, but I think in terms of what the difficulties are, I think there's essentially one, and it's the first one he mentions. He says there are three types of problem, but I think it's the first one that is the really important one. He says, first, doubt may be raised whether anything can be bad for a man without being positively unpleasant to him. Specifically, it may be doubted that there are any evils which consist merely in the deprivation or absence of possible goods and which do not depend on someone's minding that deprivation. I think that is the key. The problem was just saying that, okay, well, death is a bad, but it's it's a bad insofar as it's a loss of goods. And in fact, when you die, you lose all the goods of life that all the goods of life that you would have experienced had you not died, and that's why it's bad. Well, that's a little bit too glib because there is the problem of saying, well, if you can a law, let's say you do experience loss at death. We could say that if you die today, that means that you have lost all your future experiences of goods that you would have experienced had you not died. So we can say that it's a loss, but is it a bad for the person who dies? Well, we will lose all of our future goods if we die, but we won't mind it, will we? We won't care that we've lost them, and so we won't suffer as a result. So there's the problem. I hope that you see it. This is the one that he's got to solve. Let's just say that I have a particular book that I really love, and I put it away in a box or something during a move, and it disappears. I look for it a few months later, and I realize it's been lost somehow. And I experience feelings of regret. I wish I could have read that book, frustration, etc. Then you could say that when I lost that book, it was a bad thing for me because my realization of the loss, my consciousness, my discovery of the loss caused unpleasant feelings in me. Unfulfilled needs, longings to read it, to have it, regret, frustration, whatever. But let's just say that I have a book that I really love, and I put it away, and it gets lost in a move, and I never think about it again. It just doesn't occur to me because somehow my interests change or something. Well, still, I've experienced a loss. The book is lost, and it was my book, but I never cared because I never became conscious of the loss. So, was the loss a bad thing for me? An Epicurean would say, well, if it doesn't cause you any kind of pain or suffering because you don't become aware of it, how could you really characterize it as a bad thing? So that first problem that he outlines or describes in the bottom of page 75, top of page 76,